Today we are going to continue our deep dive into the weapons of the Turok series with Shadow of Oblivion. I will be covering every weapon, ranking them based on their overall performance and generally how fun they are to use. As always, this list is based on the Nightdive remasters, which are best for the experience. And with that said, let's get to it. Starting off at number 24, the Vampire Gun. Oh man, where do we begin with this one? The first problem that arises from using the Vampire Gun is that it saps 3 points of health from the player with every pull of the trigger. If you're like most people though, you won't realize that you need to hold it down in order to siphon health from your foes. Now add a group of enemies into the mix, who surround you and continue to deal damage while you desperately try to figure out what you're doing wrong. Even if you manage to isolate your target, it takes ages to kill them this way. At best, it stuns them long enough for you to heal up, giving you time to swap to another weapon to finish the job. It's a niche use, but at the end of the day, no, I'm not gonna say it, that would be low-hanging fruit. Screw it. The Vampire Gun sucks. Next, at number 23 and 22, we have the Knife and Tomahawk. I'm going to lump these two together since they're basically identical in terms of their damage, attack speed, and range. If I had to choose which one has the cooler design though, I'd go with the Tomahawk over the Knife. Now when compared to previous melee weapons from the franchise, these are actually pretty good. There's still no mortal wound mechanic like in Dinosaur Hunter, but their damage per second pulls way ahead of the competition. The underlying issue, however, is that you have to put yourself in harm's way to use these, and there is a lot of enemies in Turok 3 that deal damage from range. The Knife and Tomahawk do well enough in the game's first chapter, but beyond that, it's just not worth the risk to fight up close, especially at higher difficulties. At number 21, the Claws. While the Raptor pulls slightly ahead with this melee weapon, thanks to the increased range and damage, it's still not enough. The Claws failed to perform against bosses, and thus, a later patch gave our Speedy Boy access to more weapons. It can be fun dashing through the game as a prehistoric killing machine, ripping apart every enemy you come across, but when it comes time to face the bigger threats, it's a serious struggle to do any meaningful damage where it matters most. On to number 20, we have the Bow. There's nothing really new here with this weapon. It's remained mostly the same from Seeds of Evil, but the draw time feels ever so slightly faster than before. You can still retrieve arrows after each fight, and headshots are still as lethal as they've always been. The bow will serve you well enough until you acquire the upgrade, but it's nothing to write home about. Next at number 19, we have the Mag 60. Coming straight off the heels of Turok 2, it's really disappointing to see what they did to our beloved Magnum. What makes it such a mediocre weapon this go around is the fact that it's just wasteful with ammo. Whether you miss your target or kill them in one shot, those extra bullets are going nowhere. You would think a 3-round burst would make the pistol better, but it already had a decent fire rate to begin with. Thanks to the recoil between shots, well then the Mag 60 only marginally puts out more shots per second, which hardly counts as an upgrade in my opinion. At number 18, we have the Fire Swarm. Strip away the flamethrower from Seeds of Evil, then slap the fuel tank onto the shotgun, and you get this weapon. The results of this melding are not great, to be fair. When you consider how barren Shadow of Oblivion is when it comes to elite enemy types, the Fire Swarm is just overkill for what it does. You're sacrificing too much ammo for a weapon that has no effect on bosses and provides no advantage over what the standard shotgun is already capable of against basic enemies. Next at number 17, we have the Grenade Launcher. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. I will never understand the reasoning behind the nerfs this weapon received for this entry. Despite upping the number of grenades you can hold, you'll more than likely use twice as many just trying to hit something with them. The crosshair is very deceptive, requiring you to aim higher and slightly to the right of your target if you want it to land. Now consider that self-damage is returned, along with this launcher's shorter range, and you've got a recipe for disaster on your hands. Now if you've got a big target such as the Mummites or the Opithor boss, the grenade launcher can be very good against them, but as you progress through the game and acquire the upgrade for it, you'll never want to touch this weapon again. At number 16, we have the Cerebral Bore. I'll admit that this weapon was lacking some balance in Turok 2, but I think it was hit a little too hard in Shadow of Oblivion. Every mechanic from the Bore was carried over except for one, that being the limit on how many shots can be fired at a time. This itself isn't a bad thing, but they could have at least allowed us to swap weapons while the projectiles slowly chase down your target. Sure, it'll kill whatever you hit with it, but you'll be wide open to attack until the boar finally makes contact with the enemy. Next at number 15, the Cerebral Burst. Instead of drilling into an enemy's skull, the bores from this upgrade will explode, causing some respectable splash damage when detonated by the player. The best part about it though, is that you can even set the bore off before it reaches your target, allowing you to clear entire groups of enemies with relative ease. The downside, however, is that locking onto a single brain signal amidst several can be detrimental to you in the heat of combat. Then consider the fact that the bores receive no increase to their speed, which again will leave you vulnerable for a time. At number 14, we have the Cerebral Possessor. Both of the bore upgrades are pretty much the same, but where the Possessor comes out on top is its ability to take control of your enemies. With this in mind, you can change up your playstyle depending on the situation, either by possessing an enemy to draw aggro away, giving you some much needed breathing room, or simply detonating the bore for big splash damage. However you decide to use it, the Cerebral Possessor still retains all the weaknesses of its peers, but stands as the best among them. Next at number 13, the Shredder. Take the Charge Dart's stun effect and the Shredder's ricochet from Turok 2, and you get a pale imitation of both. The weapon is still serviceable on its own, but doesn't excel well enough in either role in dealing damage or crowd control. Locking down enemies is always a useful mechanic, but without a charge function, you're stuck with what you got. I suppose one could argue that being able to bounce your shots helps if you miss your target, something the Charge Dart couldn't do, but the number of bounces was drastically reduced this go around. While this Shredder isn't worthy of the name of its predecessor, the one major upside to it is that we now have the largest shotgun shell capacity ever to make up for it. At number 12, we have the Pistol. For your first weapon pickup, this is a surprisingly good sidearm that pulls way ahead of those found in Dinosaur Hunter and Seeds of Evil. Sure, it's still not the greatest in your arsenal, but there's no denying how vastly improved the fire rate is compared to its older models. You can effectively make short work of many of the game's enemies with only a few well-placed shots. With a steady supply of ammo provided to you, the pistol in Turok 3 is a solid weapon that sits comfortably in the middle of the ranking. Depending on which character you're playing, then the upgrade will make it even better or fail to impress. Now at number 11, we have the Assault Rifle. Returning from Dinosaur Hunter as the superior burst fire weapon, but now with its own ammo type, we have another staple to your loadout. Before we go any further with this one though, can I just say that we are now 3 games in and we are still calling these clips?
You absolute buffoon. What you have there is not clips. These are mags.
Oh well, blame it on Doom for setting this trend, I guess. So anyway, acquired in the military base, the assault rifle struggles to get on its feet against the heavily armored troopers that populate most of the level. But once you get the feel for it, you'll learn to play to its strengths and aim for the soft spots. With such satisfyingly crisp sound effects and its sleek militaristic design, it's hard not to appreciate this gun, even after obtaining the upgrade. Now at number 10, we have the Napalm Cannon. This upgrade alone solves some of the biggest issues with a grenade launcher, but picks up a few new ones along the way. Thankfully, the projectiles have a much further range and the ability to stick to surfaces as well as enemies, making it worthwhile to use. With a name like Napalm Cannon, you would think the explosion deals fire damage over time, like the Fire Swarm, but this is sadly not the case. It would have made for an awesome addition though. Right, so the downsides come in the form of being limited to 1 projectile deployed at a time and the delay before you can detonate them. Rage Wars gave you a separate button to do this, allowing you to lay down up to 3 explosives, but Turok 3 doesn't have an alt fire for this purpose, so you'll have to plan ahead if you want to avoid taking damage while you're vulnerable. Now at number 9, the PSG. While it's still a far cry from the super weapons in Dinosaur Hunter, the Personal Singularity Generator does have some useful applications in Turok 3. It's acquired very late into the game, but having infinite ammo will at least free you up to go absolutely ham with it, if you desire. You can clear out entire rooms with it, or completely rid yourself of the hassle of waiting on Oblivion to use the right move so that you can stun him. The unfortunate thing about the PSG, however, is that it's incredibly dangerous if you end up firing the singularity in a bad spot. But if you have a good understanding of this mechanic, then you can take advantage of it and yeet yourself across the map. Despite being slow, the PSG is a fun toy to play around with. Just don't rely on it to carry you to the end of the game. Now at number 8, the Tech Bow. I have mixed feelings about this upgrade, mainly because explosives are so inconsistent in Shadow of Oblivion. In short, you don't want to go for direct hits with your shots unless you're fighting a boss. As strange as that sounds, the splash damage is better suited for smaller targets, not only against single enemies, but groups as well. Now you might miss being able to retrieve arrows after use, but think about it. The cap on tech arrows in previous titles was 15 for the first Turok and 10 for Turok 2. This upgrade effectively turns all 40 of your arrows into explosive-tipped projectiles. That's certainly noteworthy if you can learn to overcome the flaws of the Tech Bow's damage type. Now at number 7, the Sniper Rifle. No arsenal would be complete without a bolt-action rifle that lets you pick off your foes from a safe distance. Of course, that doesn't limit this weapon to long-distance encounters only. You can totally use this at mid-range too. Just do yourself a favor and turn on auto-aim. You can thank me later. While the fire rate is slow and the ammo consumption steep, fans of this playstyle know that it's a fair trade for the added firepower. Thanks to the abundance of more open maps in Turok 3, we have more opportunities than ever to pop a few heads before the enemies start to gang up on us. You could then fall back to your other weapons for some quick cleanup before rinsing and repeating. When you need surgical precision on the battlefield, the sniper rifle is your closest ally. Now at number 6, the Razorwind. After its embarrassing debut in Seeds of Evil, the Razorwind is here to set the record straight and redeem itself as a completely viable weapon. With a shorter overall range, it now returns to your hand much faster than before, thereby removing the biggest issue it once had. It still takes a bit of skill to use properly, but with some practice, you can achieve some truly busted amounts of damage. Just bear in mind that in order to get the most out of the Razorwind, it's actually better to miss your target on purpose so that it passes through them on its way back. This gives it a lingering effect that can make short work of the Alpha Fireborn, instead of merely bouncing off as soon as it makes contact. Be sure to plan accordingly when using the Razorwind, as no weapon that both deals high damage and has infinite uses is without its flaws to balance it out. And now we're getting into the top 5 with the Silenced Pistol. As if the standard pistol wasn't already decent enough, equipping a laser sight with a suppressor somehow manages to skyrocket its performance to the stratosphere. The silencer does what you would imagine it does, and that's perpetuating the myth that you can magically eliminate the sound of a gunshot simply by duct taping a Coke bottle over the barrel. Meanwhile, the sight allows you to zoom in with the gun, but I personally never felt the need for it. The silenced pistol has the stopping power, the accuracy, and the fire rate to keep it relevant throughout your entire playthrough, putting to shame the other upgrade that Danielle receives by a country mile. Next at number 4, the Shotgun. Back again from Seeds of Evil, we have our trusty boomstick ready to dole out justice. Although explosive shells are sadly absent from this entry, the game more than makes up for it with the increased capacity. Even though it now properly expends 2 shells per shot, 35 is still a hefty amount to work with. With a much wider spread than before, the shotgun feels a bit unwieldy to use at mid-range, but that's what I'd come to expect from a weapon in this category. You'll learn to accept the shorter range as a fair trade for the immense amount of damage that this gun outputs. Now at number 3, the Firestorm Cannon. After committing some identity theft, the minigun has made its triumphant return from Dinosaur Hunter under a new guise. Everything about this weapon overshadows its predecessors to such a ridiculous degree that it's hard to imagine anything else coming along to compete with it. With how strong bullet weapons are in Turok 3, it's no wonder the one with the highest sustained fire rate comes out on top. And if that weren't enough, it also boasts some incredible precision for something that's traditionally fired from the hip, making it suitable for sniping. All it takes is a light tap on the fire button and it turns everything into mulch. How is the Firestorm Cannon this deadly while also being this accurate? It should be a crime. Now at number 2, the RPG. It's no Scorpion launcher from Turok 2, but I have to admit, the rocket-propelled grenade is still good enough to stand among the titans of this franchise. It sacrifices some speed for a straighter shooting projectile, ensuring that it'll go wherever you aim it. Like all the explosive weapons in this game, splash damage will net you better results, so use that to your advantage whenever possible. The RPG also boasts a higher capacity than its predecessors, providing you with some lasting firepower where you really need it. Despite not doing anything flashy like firing in a volley or having a lock-on feature, nothing beats having a reliable weapon that deals heavy damage. Finally, at number 1, the Stormbow. What we have here might be the most perfectly balanced weapon in all of Turok's arsenal. It's not absurdly broken like the Shredder in Seeds of Evil, nor does it completely steal the spotlight away from other guns. With a fast fire rate, piercing damage, long range, a zoom function, and the ability to retrieve your ammo, it delivers the full package you need to get the job done and get it done quickly. Like the auto shotgun from Dinosaur Hunter, it's a workhorse from start to finish, but ultimately comes out on top in this ranking for everything else it brings to the table. If there was just one nitpick I have with the Stormbow, just one tiny gripe, is that it shoots arrows instead of bolts. But that is entirely visual and does nothing to detract from how awesome of a weapon this is. And that's all 24 weapons in Turok 3, arranged from worst to best. Do you agree or disagree with the rankings? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're there, please let me know what game you'd like me to cover next. Now that we are done with the Nightdive remasters for the Turok trilogy, I think it would be fun to visit something else for a change. If you've made it this far into the video, then I thank you for sticking around. I don't need to tell you how YouTube works, but please consider subscribing if you're new around here, leaving a like, or sharing with a friend. Making a video like this does take a lot of work to produce, so that kind of stuff really goes a long way to helping me out. I also stream nearly every day on both YouTube and Twitch, where I do speedruns or retro achievements. So if that's something you might be interested in, then head over to your platform of choice where you can catch me when I'm live. Until then, stay safe and comfy out there.